Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing a really fun shaker card with you and some of my top tips for creating shaker cards. I'm going to be using this circle windows plate die from Gina K Designs. It's got that beautiful stitch detail all around the edge and around the circles. And I'm going to be using the Coffee Critters stamp set as well. This is also from Gina K Designs. It's got those really cute little animals and their coffee cups and some great sentiments. So we'll be using that today, but of course you can use whatever you've got in your stash already. And if you don't have a special cover plate die like this, then you create your own. You just circle dies in different areas on a card panel and create your own windows. So I've already gone ahead and die cut the panel, and I've got a piece of lilac coloured cardstock which I'll be using behind it. And the die itself actually measures 3.5 inches by 4 3/4 inches, and so my lilac coloured card is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. Now I want to add some detail to the back of the shaker windows, so I'm going to do some stamping on the lilac coloured card, and I'm going to use the circle die plate to be like the guide and template as to where I need to do my stamping. So I'm using that to help me line up the stamps, and I'm just using this coffee bean stamp with some VersaFine Clair Acorn ink. So that's a lovely rich brown. It goes really well with the coffee beans, and I just want to kind of stack these beans up in the windows of the shaker card just for a bit of extra interest in the background. Of course you could stamp some of the coffee cups here, you could have stamped a sentiment behind a shaker window if you wanted to, but I really like the idea of having these coffee beans just stacked up. And before I use the coffee beans again to kind of work out where I want it, I'm making sure to clean it off with my tidy towel every time I use it. I don't want to get ink on the card where I'm not stamping, and also remember, because we're using a pigment ink, it will just take a few moments to dry, so we want to be careful that we don't smudge it or get any ink anywhere that we don't want it. So while I've got my stamping platform out, I'm going to stamp the sentiment on the front of the shaker panel. So this is the cover plate die that we've already gone ahead and die cut on some white card, and I'm just lining up that sentiment there. So this sentiment says life is better with friends and coffee, but I've actually cut the and coffee section off this stamp because it doesn't quite fit there when it's all stuck together. So I can then go ahead and move that in and then stamp it afterwards. So I've done this quite a few times with this stamp on other cards that I've made, but it's a great little hack if you've got a stamp like this and you really want it to fit in a smaller space. If you're able to cut it up, then go ahead and do it. It doesn't damage your stamps. Just keep the bits together and you can always just line them back up again. Really easy to do. So I'm also going to stamp the bear as well. I've got a piece of white card. This is just a scrap from a piece of smooth white cardstock from Craft Stash, the Creative Craft Products range, and I'm going to stamp in Memento Tuxedo black ink because it's the perfect ink for using with your alcohol markers. Unfortunately, this card is no longer available. I'm really gutted, but Craft Stash have announced that they're closing their doors. They currently have a massive closing down sale, and it's just really sad here in the UK because that is one of the best places to go to get all your crafting supplies. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to link this in my description video anymore, and I've got to go on the hunt for another white card to use. But yeah, I'm using what I've got at the moment. So I'm going to colour with some Ohuhu alcohol markers. I'm going to be using these colours here, and I've swatched them out on a piece of white card. I've got BR1, BR2, R11, P810 and CG200. And so I will leave these colours linked in the description box below for your reference. I like to just swatch my colours out first on a scrap of card just to kind of check how they're going to work together. And I know that people have swatch sheets, but because I don't always use the same cardstock, I prefer to test it on the card that I'm using each time, just because the colours can look slightly different. So I'm just doing some very basic colouring. I'm not an alcohol marker colourist by any means. So this is just really basic colouring skills here. And I'm just using the darker colour to go around the edge of the outline of the bear, and then the lighter colour to kind of blend that in and create a little bit of shading and variation in the colour. So definitely don't watch me for colouring tips, but this is just how I colour. It's quick and easy. It's great for card making. You know, I don't always have the time to spend hours on colouring, and so this is just a great way of getting colour down, and it still looks semi-decent when it's finished. So yeah, I did end up bringing in another colour there, which was the BR3, and that was just a lighter colour for his nose and tummy. So now he's all nice and coloured in, I'm going to go ahead and fussy cut him out. I've got these Tim Holtz mini recoil scissors here, and I'm just going to use those to cut my image out. These scissors are great for fussy cutting, so if you don't have a decent pair of scissors for fussy cutting, I would definitely recommend either the Tim Holtz recoil scissors or the CutterBee scissors. Both of those are my go-to when it comes for cutting out detailed images. I do kind of feel like with the recoil scissors, because you don't have thumb holes, it just gives you a little bit more flexibility with your hands. You've got a little bit more movement and a little bit of more control. And unlike the normal Tim Holtz scissors, there's no serrated edge on these, so you get a lovely smooth, clean cut. So to start putting our shaker card together, first of all, I'm adding some liquid glue all over the back of that panel. This is the Barely Art glue, and then I'm going to add a piece of acetate. So this is cut slightly smaller than the frame, so it's just under 3.5 inches by 4 3/4 inches. And I'm just going to put my magnets on it just to hold it down while the glue grabs. Now I'm going to use some foam tape to attach this to the card, but because I don't have any thin foam tape, I'm going to use some baking paper and attach my wider foam tape to the baking paper. I'm sorry this is a little bit of a poor camera angle, but all I'm doing is sticking it to the back of that baking paper, and then I'm able to trim down thin strips of foam tape without gunking up my scissors. And this would be one of my top tips when creating shaker cards. If you don't have any thin foam strips or foam tape, then definitely add your wider tape to some baking paper or greaseproof paper, and then you're able to trim it down into thin strips, which you can use for your shaker window. Another top tip would be, if you don't like messing about with foam tape, then you could die cut that cover plate die multiple times, probably another 3 or 4 times, glue them all together and stack them up, and then line them up with your front panel and the acetate and glue those down as well. That way you wouldn't need to worry about foam tape, and you could just create the shaker windows in exactly the same way with a lot less fuss. But obviously, if you don't have a cover plate die like this, and you're creating your own apertures, then you will need to use foam tape. And I'm just showing you here the easiest way to trim that tape down. And you want to make sure that there's no gaps. So I'm isolating all of these shaker windows. I don't want all my shaker elements to sink to the bottom of the card completely. So I'm adding tape around each of the windows, and you just want to make sure that there's no gaps so that those sequins can't escape into the back of the card. I'm also finding it quite easy to bend my foam tape around the windows, but if you are struggling with your foam tape, removing the backing paper first can help with that. So now that's ready, I'm going to stick that purple layer down to my card blank. This is a US A2 size card that I've cut myself from some US letter size cardstock. I'm next just seeing exactly where those windows are going to show on my card front before I go ahead and add some sequins. So I want to make sure that the sequins are going to just be in those little window areas, and that I can then stick the card front down without getting sequins trapped all underneath the foam tape. I'm just creating a custom blend here of sequins and little beads that I've got in my stash. I'm using the We Are Memory Keepers Bloom storage for some of my sequins, which I absolutely love. And now another top tip for creating shaker cards is to make sure that once you've added the sequins, first you've not overfilled them, that they're nice and flattened out so that they've got movement when you put the shaker windows over the top of them, and to use an anti-static powder bag on the acetate so that the acetate doesn't stay static and attract all those sequins and then stop them from shaking around. I am going to add some liquid glue to the back of all that foam tape so that I've got a little bit of wiggle room to make sure that it's nice and lined up. And you don't want to overfill your shaker windows. It's always really tempting to add way too many sequins, but then they can get kind of stuck underneath the acetate and then they don't move. So it's always a good idea just to add a few sequins, make sure that they're nice and flat on your card before you stick the windows over the top, and then that way you'll get some nice movement in the shaker card. And of course you want to test it as well, make sure that there's no gaps. So I'm just going to stick the bear and the fox down with a little bit of foam tape. Obviously the bear we coloured in together today, and the fox was already pre-coloured and cut out in the back of my stamp set. Any extra bits I like to store in the back of the packets like that. Again, I'm adding a little bit of liquid glue just so that I've got a little bit of wiggle room. And then I'll just show you that the card shakes beautifully. And so that's our finished card for today. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope that you found some of these tips helpful. As always, all the products that I've used will be linked in the description box below. Please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you've enjoyed this tutorial and leave me a comment. It really helps me out. Don't forget as well, if you'd like to see more from me, then don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.